Hello, welcome to another exciting episode of Pete vs. Anxiety. My guest today is a trauma therapist who built her entire career on the one core belief: therapy should actually help you feel different, not just talk in circles, establishing healthy eating habits. Please welcome in the one, the only Caroline. Is it Kobilinsky? No, if I can even,
Kobilinsky.
you know what?
Kobilinsky.
In my head, that was how I
Yes.
had it
No, I
said, but it
used
didn't
to
come
be a
out.
Watson, and then I got married, and I'm a Kobilinsky, and nobody can say it, and nobody can pronounce it. So, yeah.
Well, Caroline, go ahead and tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Okay, so I am a therapist in Texas. I'm a trauma therapist. I have been in private practice since 2021, and in regular therapy, I started out working in substance use and dual diagnosis in 2017 and worked in high acuity care with young men 18 to 35 that were treatment resistant and had significant mental health struggles. So it was very intense, loved it, but got really burned out and wanted to do something a little different. So now I am in private practice and specialize in trauma, and that includes grief, caregiver grief. I specialize in life transitions. And so with that, whether that means moving from high school to college or first jobs or divorce or empty nest, kind of whatever that looks like, trauma comes with all of those things. And really, grief comes from every transition, even if it's a good one. And so helping clients work through that. I also work with eating disorders. I have been in recovery from my own eating disorder since 2020, and that's how I got into that. And what else do I work with? If you're a complex case, I'm probably your therapist. I'm the therapist for people that don't believe in therapy. I am really straightforward. I'm pretty funny. My husband says I'm not funny, but my clients think I'm very funny, and so I'm going to choose to believe what they believe. And yeah, that's kind of he says that he's the funny one in our relationship, and I'm like, you're funny. And every time that I make a joke, he's like, just leave it to me. But yeah, so I love my job. I take my job really seriously, but I also think that it's important to bring humor to the conversation and to allow clients to be able to laugh in the circumstances that they're in, because a lot of times, most people don't go to therapy when they are living their best life. And so to help clients be able to find humor in things, I think is really helpful in helping them to move through instead of just perseverating on what is not going well.
Wow, that's a lot there. You went from just to one to the other. It's just damn, you've been everywhere. So I mean, where do we start? Jeez. Well, I know that your caregiver one comes from your own sister, correct? She had stage 4 cancer.
Yes, yes. And so caring for my sister-in-law, that was actually this time last year. In fact, before we got on this podcast, I was like, I sort of feel like I just want to cry. Grief is so weird. And my husband and I were her caretakers, and he was there during the day and I was there at night. And so we really just lived with her. And we really have been caught off guard with how triggering this year has been since about the middle of October. And so that's a new part of my journey of figuring out how I worked through. And we're going to talk about some of the trauma modalities that I do that I love and am such a believer in. But worked through stuff, and now more stuff is coming up. And I think that that's so important for clients to remember, is that things are layered, and we work through things and we get to a good place, and then something else happens and we think, this is another layer and I need to do some more work. And so especially with trauma, I think it's really important to be able to know that and normalize that as opposed to just feeling like a failure when something pops up again.
Yeah, I know. And when it comes to trauma, I know it's really hard for people. Grief is really hard too for a lot of people because it's like when you get in that situation, it's like the first question is, what do you say to someone if someone that's dealing with something? Do you have any advice for anybody?
I have a lot
I
of
know it's a very
advice.
I know it's a very touchy subject for like a lot of
Yeah,
people don't want to hear certain things, and other people,
right.
and the cancer thing hits home for me because I have a good friend of mine that
Okay.
I know that I work with. His aunt has just found out she has stage 4 cancer, and what didn't tell anybody, and he just lost his cousin, which was her son. He died in his sleep, unfortunately. So like we ran into that
Wow.
situation recently where I had to have a conversation with him. I was just like, bud, I wish I knew what to say to you at this point. Like, if you need me, just call me, obviously, because he knows what a lot of people know I do this podcast, and a lot of people come to me and talk to me about a lot of stuff. So when I get to meet people such as yourself, it's great to have takeaways and things I can do use in my everyday
Yeah.
life from when I run into these kind of situations.
So I think one of the biggest things, and I learned this in undergrad, these many years ago, that a lot of times when something happens, the best thing to say is, I'm so sorry, and I don't know what to say, but I'm here to support you. And I think it can get really overcomplicated when we are trying to interact with someone with grief because we don't know what to say. And you don't want to say the wrong thing and you don't want to be triggering. But I will say this, a lot of times people say, I don't want to say anything because I don't want to trigger anybody. They're already thinking about it. Like, you're not going to bring up anything that they are not already thinking about. So don't be afraid to say something. I think another thing that people really want to do is they want to tell their story and they want to tell the story of the person that they lost. And so asking, like, hey, do you want to talk about them? Do you want to tell me some funny stories? Do you want to tell me about what you're experiencing right now? I think that grief can be really unsettling to people because people don't know what to say. And kind of normalizing that process, I think, is really important. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, makes perfect
Okay.
sense. So like I said, because I think you hit all the right points. Is a lot of people don't know what to say, and a lot of people don't even just saying something instead of nothing is probably better. I would think at least acknowledge the fact because this person's dealing with this. Let them know, hey, listen, hey, if you want to talk, I'm here. I'm so sorry. That's what I told him too. I said, listen, man, you want to talk, you know where to find me. He goes, oh, and he was telling me about it. And it was so interesting because like everybody comes to me and tells me all these things, and they're like, "Oh yeah, let me."
Yeah.
Hey, I know what you do. That's what they'll start the conversation. That's why I know it's going to be something mental health or grief or something. Well, hey, Pete, I know
Yeah.
you do these conversations every day, so let me talk to you about it. I'm like, all right,
Yeah.
I guess let's talk about it. Why not?
Yeah.
Here we
Let's
go.
hear about it. Well, and I think another thing that's really helpful, instead of just saying, hey, I'm here if I need you, if you know them well, think of things that you could do. In the midst of grief, people are not, that frontal lobe is not online. And so thinking about what do I need a lot of times is really hard. So saying, hey, can I drop off dinner? Like, what would you like? If you know what they like, say, hey, I'm dropping this off. Like, bring them their favorite like drink and some kind of like treat. Like, I love a nothing but cake. Love a nothing but cake. I don't know if y'all know what those are.
Yep, I'm
But
here in Texas as well. When you said
you
Texas, I'm
know,
here in Texas as well, so I know exactly what that is.
yeah. So like somebody dropping me off a Diet Dr. Pepper and a little mini bud cake. That would, I mean, it's just thoughtful things like that of like, and if you know them well, hey, can I come over and do your laundry? Hey, and I know that seems really invasive, but it's stuff like that that people don't really realize those are the things that people are struggling with, of just kind of the everyday thing. And if you don't know people well, get creative. Like, hey, send some flowers. I always love that. I think that's a really sweet way to just say, hey, I'm thinking of you. So just stuff that, stuff like that, that is
Yeah.
just kind of the everyday practical things. I think that's also a really great way to let people know that you're thinking about them and that you're caring for them.
Yeah, yeah. He's a big monster guy, so like we usually leave monsters or whatever for each other. So I'll leave him energy drinks all the time, you know. So I
I
left him a
love
couple.
that.
So you know, he and I usually trade off different ones, and I'm like, here you go, man. You ever try this one? Here, I got one extra one in here for you, kind of thing. It's just those little things that make it better for him, you know. And I check in with him all the time, like, hey man, are you
Yeah.
okay? And he said he was good, man, but he's just like, you know, I told our boss about it. And he's like, well, don't tell anybody else. Well, I went and I didn't tell her. I said, listen, hey, just so you know, you're gonna know he's a little broken up about something. I just want to give you a heads up that he's a little upset right now, and he came and told me about it, and I wanted to let you know. And our boss is usually pretty good when it comes to a lot of things. She can identify a lot of stuff. So let's get into the topic of trauma now. Now, this is not a fun
Yeah.
topic for a lot of people. So what do you recommend for people that maybe someone may be going through some trauma? Do you have some tips for maybe that loved one? Because I know we talk about the people that deal with trauma, but not a lot of people talk about the people that have to deal with these people that deal with trauma, like some things that maybe they can have
I
as
think that's
little helpful tips.
Yeah, I think that is a really great thought. So Gabor Mate, who I love, 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 he is an addictionologist. He's an MD and a PhD. He's one of the smartest people that I have ever heard. But just the definition of trauma to start out with, trauma is not what happens to you, it's what happens inside of you as the response. And I think that that's really important to kind of differentiate because a lot of times trauma's subjective. And so one person can experience something and be really traumatized by it, and another person could experience the same thing, and they're like, "What's wrong with you? Like, this is not a big deal." So, I think it's really important to kind of create that definition to start with. So, I define trauma as, let me kind of explain the science of trauma a little bit because I think it's helpful. One of the things that I'm really passionate about is helping people understand the physiology of trauma. So, we have a limbic system, and your limbic system is your fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And so that is what God created to protect us. And so, back in like caveman days, your limbic system, your amygdala, that was like the biggest part of people because literally they needed to, like, if there's a saber-toothed tiger coming after me, like, I need to remember that so I don't get killed. So, when you have that flight response, your body literally responds. Your blood pressure goes up, your adrenaline starts pumping. If you notice people that are getting really anxious, they might start shaking their legs. That's literally your body getting ready it's generating blood there. So if you need to flee or fight the situation, you're going to be able to do that. And so during that time, our frontal lobe goes offline. And so our frontal lobe is um, it responds to options, it likes collaboration, like that's the computer part of our brain. And so when our amygdala and our limbic system is responding to a threat, that frontal lobe is not necessary anymore. And so if you think about little kids, once they pass this point, they have gone completely limbic and you cannot reason with them. Like they have to like step away or do something. And I think that's such a good picture of what our limbic system looks like. When it goes into that overdrive place, it's hard to come back from that without some skills. So there's fight, flight, freeze, and people are very familiar with those. One thing that I like to say about freeze is I have a client that goes into hypoarousal, and the way that she describes it is she literally plays dead. And so if you think of a possum, when there's a threat, they just fall down and act like they're dead. And so that is what the freeze response is. But they have started probably in the last 5 or 6 years, maybe longer than that, um, come up with this idea of fawning. And so when there is a fawning response, that is when people become over compliant. And it's a lot like Stockholm syndrome. Instead of fighting, flighting, or freezing, they get their needs met by becoming overly compliant and overly easy to get along with. And I think that's something that a lot of times doesn't get kind of the credit that it's due, because we see that and we're like, well, you're being like so nice. Like, here's this person that abuses you, and you're like asking them if they need anything else. And understanding that that is a limbic response, I think is really, really important for education.
I think it's a really
So,
good point though, because a lot of people that see that don't understand that's what's going on in that conversation. Because a lot of times portrayed is you see that other person, but they don't really understand why that other person is doing that. So I think that's a really great point.
yeah. So I think the education part is really important in understanding and understanding other people's trauma response, because for the person that's not experiencing it, a lot of times it doesn't make any sense. A lot of times for the person experiencing it, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So if you are interacting with someone that is having a trauma response, I think the first thing is to get understanding of what is happening. And the second thing is to figure out, what does compassion look like for you? And I think that compassion looks differently for everyone. My idea of compassion is definitely not the same as my husband's idea of compassion. He's been sober for 19 years, and I'll come home, be processing, and, this person and blah, blah. And he'll say, well, it sounds like that you're working harder than they are. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I guess that's right. And here I am trying to just like emote all of these things. And that's his response. And so I think it's really important to know what compassion looks like for you, and to think through that before you are in the place that somebody is going to need it. So, like we were talking about with grief, if someone is in a limbic response, I think it's really important for you to, one, not say calm down. But two, I think that a really great question is, how can I make this situation look like you want it to look? And that not only puts the ball back in their court to figure that out, but it brings that frontal lobe back online, because they don't feel like they're having to fight the person that is trying to help them. I think that's a really, really, really great question to ask. Another thing that I think is really helpful in that moment is, do you want me to help, or do you want me to listen? A lot of times when people are having a trauma response, they don't want you to solve anything for them. They just want you to listen and be present. And again, figuring out, what does compassion look like for you? Also knowing what does the response of the people in your life look like? Some people have really intense reactions when something happens, and other people are just not able to handle that. And so having that conversation, beforehand, I think is really important. Because you don't want people to think that you've just checked out and that you don't care,
Yeah.
because that's not true at all. And so, I think a lot of it is really figuring out on the front end, what does your response to trauma look like? And so whether that looks like reading blogs or reading books, I know that some people love to read books, maybe an audiobook. Um, but just figuring out kind of beforehand. And I think that's probably a skill that everybody could use, because you're going to encounter people with trauma forever, like until you die and hopefully go to heaven. um, so does that answer your question of kind of
Hmm.
how to
Yeah, no,
interact?
I think
Okay.
it's really great. I think awesome. So let's
Okay.
lead into the comment. Oh, but my childhood was fine. I think this was a very interesting question you had posted there, because I think a lot of people hear, well, my childhood was fine, but some people's childhood. So let's take my wife for example. Hers was something pretty crazy. Like, she told me some of it, but not all of it. Enough of it that it was just wild. We went from dad trying to burn the house down to some real wild shit going on. But
Yeah,
all these people always tell you that, oh, well, my childhood is fine. Well, that's great, but that wasn't what somebody else's childhood was. I hate it when people say
exactly.
that.
And I think that is dead on. Kids think that whatever is going on in their home is what everybody else is experiencing. And a lot of times when people have traumatic childhoods, when people are having really adverse experiences in their childhood, they're a little bit isolated. And so they don't spend a lot of time at other people's homes. And some of them that do realize, like, hey, your house doesn't look like my house. Um, and so I think people can start to realize that, but I think that's a really important part of normalizing kind of what people have experienced because everybody thinks that their childhood was normal and everybody learns how to cope in some kind of way. So those trauma responses, the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, everybody figures out how to get their needs met and how to stay safe. And so if that's your way of coping with things, like, of course, you're like, no, that's just what I did. And it feels like second nature. And to get around people that didn't have the same childhood experiences as you did, I think it's really eye opening. I get a lot of people that come in and say that. And I'm like, well, let's kind of piece this apart a little bit and when we start talking through it, for somebody just to kind of point out like, "Hey, that's not normal." And, like, I know that normal is such a people get really fired up about what's normal and what's not. But, like, "Hey, that's not a typical experience." Like, if your dad was so volatile that he was threatening to burn down the house, like, that's a big deal, and most other people don't experience that. And I have a client that, was horrifically sexually abused from a really young age. And so we're doing a lot of trauma work around that. And her responses to the way that she is raising her children have been really eye opening to her because I've been like, hey, that's not like the rest of the world is not doing that. And so to piece through with her, even though that's like hugely traumatic. And like, obviously, if you've been sexually abused from the time that you were 5, the rest of the world is like, hey, that's not okay. That was her experience from the time that she was 5. And so to think through that she doesn't have any memories really before that, and how that's affecting her life today. I think there's also this tendency to think this was a long time ago. And so I can't feel upset about this anymore. So I think that there's several things that play into that. I think that open communication is a really big part of that. That's how a lot of people get into therapy is they start telling their stories and other people are like, that's not normal. And they come
Right.
in and they're like, "Hey, everybody keeps telling me this was not normal. I think I'm fine." Um, and that's the way a lot of people get into therapy is just telling their story.
Yeah, mine has their childhood trauma too. My mom abandoned me when I was 10, but like when I was 10, I didn't think about what happened when it happened. Like she dropped me off at my dad's doorstep and then the ripple effect it had through my rest of my life because I never really dealt with it because I didn't think about it. Like when you're 10 years old, you don't know what's going on. You have no idea what's going on. You just know what's happening in the moment. But I realized when I went
Right.
to therapy that I go back to that moment, but not exactly that moment. Like I go back to that feeling, and I think that, a lot of people don't realize is like just because it happened doesn't mean you forget about it because like I'd go back to the moment. Anytime any situation felt close to that, I get real upset. Like I get real panic and kind of things like that. And I go back to that flashback moment like mom's left me. So I kind of picture the other person as my mom leaving me. So like I go into this panic mode and just
Absolutely.
absolutely tell them just start leaving. Like, well, you just gotta go. And it's still something I deal with now, but it's hard, because it's like you go in that moment and you feel that feeling, and it's just like that feeling comes overwhelming, and you just like instantly jump into that fight or flight mode. You're like, okay, well, and then I'll start telling people to leave, like, hey, you gotta go, but I want you to go before you end up just leaving me like she did.
Leaving me.
And I come
Yeah.
back to that a lot of times when it happens too. And it's something I've been working through, but it didn't mean it's still there. Like, and
Yeah.
everybody comparing childhoods together, it's like battles. It's like war zone stories, man. They're just going about and you're just realizing how messed up some of your friends' childhoods actually were versus
Yes.
your own. And it's like, oh, well, okay, that's an interesting perspective of things that went on there. Okay. And especially that one friend that always tries to come up with the most like craziest thing ever in the group. And you're just like, well, this just takes the cake of it all. Okay. All right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's,
Well, and I think that's the other thing is people compare trauma of
hmm
like, this happened to me, but this could have, this happens to other people. And I think that is a huge thing about people feeling like they don't have the right to say that their childhood was traumatic because things happen and they're like, well, there were other kids that were beaten and sexually abused and like all of these things. And so they don't feel like their situation warrants trauma.
Yeah.
And, like I said, trauma is just so subjective. Um, Sorry, my thing is falling out. So I want to come back to one thing that you said. So in the last probably 10 to 15 years, we have Bessel van der Kolk came out with a book called The Body Keeps the Score. And it is a life-changing read for a lot of people. You talking about you go back to this physical experience that you had when she left. That is what our limbic system does. And that is what keeps us safe. And so sounds and smells and feelings, those are all the things that when we experience those things, our limbic system goes, not safe, not safe, not safe, got to get out of here. And so that's why we respond in those ways. And so I'm trained in EMDR and accelerated resolution therapy. A lot of people have heard of EMDR. That's been around. Oh, I got certified in 2018. So 15 or 20 years. And it is all about connecting these current emotions to the touchstone memory. And that's what they call it in EMDR is where did this start? And so with EMDR, it's a lot more open-ended. EMDR can be, and I love EMDR. I did EMDR with a client on Friday, but I also have gotten certified in accelerated resolution therapy. And it is much more close-ended than EMDR. It is the most um, effective and gentle way that I have found to process trauma. It is all about moving body sensations. And so we are tapping into, like you said, like I would be interested when you get that feeling of like thinking about your mom. Do you feel that physically somewhere?
Yeah, it's like my pulse starts racing. I get real worked up easily. Like I get really
Hmm.
agitated when we get in that moment. It's usually in heated arguments too, because I always
Yeah.
remembered my parents argue all the time,
Mhm.
and that's how the thing started between me and her was that we started arguing, and you just getting that feeling like any kind of intense arguments usually start bringing that feeling out where I just start getting like I start feeling cornered, and I may not be getting cornered honestly in the conversation. I'll start feeling like I'm
Right.
cornered and then I'll start lashing out and telling this person to leave and things like that. Just go, you need to go. And it's happened several times where I've told her to leave. Like I'm like, you need to go, just get out or whatever, this and that. And it just get that sensation. It just starts coming. I start getting angry. It starts getting loud and I start yelling and things like
Yeah.
that too. And it's just that sensation, like you get in this heated arguments, and then all of a sudden it's like the minute I get a feeling like I think it's going that this person's going to leave, it's like I need to get this person out before they can leave me, kind of thing. So I'm not going to get left. I'm going to leave them so I can, I could get the winning of the fight, and instead of like that sensation. My mom just left me all of a sudden, and then all of a sudden it was just like then she wanted me to come back, and I was like, no, I don't think so. And then my early experiences with therapy was that she took me to a therapist and said that I had a problem. And then it turned out she was the
Right.
one that had the coping issue. Didn't like that idea. She just said, well, forget
Yes.
it. I'm done.
Yeah.
So we stopped going to therapy all of a sudden there because it was mom that had the problem. It wasn't me, because early on it still wasn't really a big issue for me. It was just like I was just done. And I was just finished, and anybody who knows astrology would lead to why I have an Aries moon. It kind of makes sense, because that sense of like Aries moon is like, when you're done with people, you're done. That's it. And in an early age, I already
Mhm.
had that sensation of like, you know what? I'm just done. As soon as she did it
Yeah.
and then tried to invite me to come back, I was like, no, I'm good. I'm going to stay right where I'm at. I don't want to go back to that because, she wasn't just verbally abusive. She was physically abusive too. I do remember times where
Wow.
she literally beat the hell out of me one time. She was stomping on me like she was trying to put out a fire, kind of. It's the one I can remember the most. I always think of, and things like that too. And then you always tell like how mad she was based on what she said to you next. Like
Hmm.
your first name, okay, your middle name, all right, you're really gonna get in some trouble. And then you hear her dun, 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 stomping up the stairs. Like you just have that mental picture of her stomping up the stairs, and she's yelling your first, middle, last name. Oh, you better get ready because you're about to get a beating right there, because that's what she
Yeah.
would do. She'd just start lashing out and yelling and screaming at you. My dad was a little different though. Like you could just tell based on the tone of his voice how mad he was. If he's doing a little shouting, okay, he's just a little upset with you. Now if he's quiet, oh man, you better believe you're in for a couple strap shots, and that's it. And he was very He's very diligent when he did his discipline. He just kind of gave you a couple swats and then told you what you did wrong and then said, and then sent you to your room basically. And after that, it was just kind of a done deal. Didn't sit there and keep dwelling on it for a bit. I mean, if he was really upset, maybe it was different, but we had to really do something to really get him up to that rage level,
Yeah.
and things like that too. But I know early on he was a heavy drinker and I know that was a problem for a bit, but it really later on really wasn't a big deal for him after that point. I do remember some like arguments when we were kids about things and just like little things you remember as you go, kind of stuff like that. So,
Yeah. Well, I mean, thank you for sharing all of that. I'm so sorry that all of that happened. It seems like you have done the work though, to kind of move through that
yeah.
and not
It
have that dictate the rest of your life.
it was hard. I had to make the realization before I started this podcast that I needed help, and I've known I needed help, and I avoided it. And my advice to anybody is that if you feel like you need that help, go get that help because don't let it just keep sitting because you're going to cause more problems for yourself than instead of trying to fix the
Yeah.
problem. And I didn't for the longest time. I didn't want to admit I had a problem, and then I was raising 3 kids on my own, and I took my rage out on those poor kids too. And then they don't want to. It goes on and on. It's like there's many reasons
Yes.
why I should have started therapy a long time ago and I didn't. I don't know what it was that just stopped me from wanting to do it. I mean, maybe it was just denial. I just didn't want to admit I had a problem, even though I did. I had a major problem I didn't see until now I'm looking back at it. I could go through and tell you exactly the points where I really should have gone and get some help a long time ago and I chose not to.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the other part of things is that generational trauma. And if you don't work it out on you, if you don't work it out with yourself, you're going to transfer it on to your kids. And
Mhm.
I think that's one of the things that's really important to remember is that, and that I talk to parents about quite a lot is, if you don't work out your stuff, it is going to get worked out and you're probably going to work it out on your kids or you're going to work it out on your spouse. And I have some younger clients that I work with, my young guns, I call them. And that's one of the things that we talk about is I'm like, let's get honest about this now because you don't want to spend your life. I know that you're 16 right now, but you do have the wherewithal to know that you're going to get married one day and you don't want this to be your life with your marriage.
Yeah.
So I think that generational trauma is a huge piece of things because, well, it's like I said, when you don't work it out, you're going to work it out on somebody else. And I think that with I'm trying to think of how to say this. With working through trauma comes compassion and forgiveness. And I think that there's such a misconception about forgiveness that you have to get back in relationship with that person, and that is not true. Some people are not safe to be in relationship with, and
Yeah.
but keeping unforgiveness is you drinking poison and wanting the other person to die. It has no effect on them. Like they're just over there bebopping along and they're probably not even thinking about you. They have moved on to injure someone else or do something else with their life. But you're still stuck in it.
Right.
And
Exactly.
forgiveness is divine, and I think that it's really hard to really forgive someone without the help of some sort of spiritual entity, because it's really hard to allow for that. And, I think that the other thing about people not wanting to forgive is they are afraid that somehow they're going to be blamed for it. And that's not what forgiveness is about either. And forgiveness is about you being free of what has happened and you being able to move forward so that you can be your best self instead of being in a trauma response to this other person.
Yeah, I think forgiveness is the hardest part for me so far that I'm dealing with. It's like this endless wall that just keeps, like, I want to get over it, but then it's like that wall just says, oh, never mind, gonna extend past you. Don't think so. You're going to keep dealing with this,
Yes.
and I know she wants to have a relationship. So I know this next year I've already made a plan to just kind of come to amends with it, just have an honest conversation with her about it and try and get over this hump because I don't want it to be one of those moments where you're like, well, what if I made it? A better effort to get past this, we could have at least had a relationship, because when she's gone, she'll be gone. There's no There's no going back.
Right.
There's no time machines for bring back time and things like that. And I think like that in my head, that's the endless song I play is just like, but it's like getting over that moment is the hardest part for me because
Yeah.
like I said, it just like constantly just keeps beating you back every time you try and go over it. And I think that's the hardest part I've had so far is just the forgiveness thing. Like I don't forgive easily. I held
Yeah.
grudges like hell. Listen, we stopped talking for like 13 years, I think, at one point. And that was after the birth of my first daughter when, she was really young. She's like 18 now. So we stopped talking for at least 13 years because
Wow.
when I called and told her about it, she just flipped out. You could hold the phone this far away from your ear and hear her screaming on the
Wow.
phone. Instead of being happy that I'm here, and she's like, "You're 19, you're having a kid." Okay, well, I'm having a kid at 19. I get your point of view. At least I'm here. I'm trying to be present. I'm not
Yeah.
giving up on my responsibility and saying, "Oh, well, Eventually, my daughter did get adopted, which was probably for the best because I was still a very toxic person. As I'm realizing, as I met some of these people I've used to, I used to work with a while ago. They used to tell me that, like you were a horrible person to be around. Like, all these things that I had to come face, and it was just like the reality of it. It's like, I can't get mad at these people for telling these things because they weren't wrong. I was a terrible person to be around.
Yeah.
I could tell you reflecting on these things, they're 100% correct. I was a horrible human being. I was not a pleasant person to be around, and now I have to deal with the problem I have with my daughters now. They don't want to talk to me because I was such a verbally abusive person to them, and I was such a horrible
Yeah.
person. But it's something I have to admit that I should have taken more responsibility as an adult sooner and got my help sooner.
Yeah.
But all I can do is just go forward and show them that I'm changing. And when I started this podcast, it was about bringing awareness, but at the same time, it's a healing journey because I talk about my problem all the
Yeah.
time with people. I get to meet different people that teach me different techniques I could use and things like that, and I can bring back to use with other people. And it's been great. It's been an eye-opening experience. I did 200 episodes in the first year. Why? Because I'm an overworker. But, in those
Yep.
200 conversations, every time I hit record, it was a new conversation about something new. And you got to meet new people and learn new things about other things, and all these things I didn't know before, and then I started self-reflecting after, halfway through season one. And it was just like, man, I got a lot of work to do. But at the same
Yeah.
time, it was easier to accept the fact that I was a horrible person. I know I was a horrible person. Like 10 years ago, you could never get me to admit that. I would never admit I'm wrong. It's still a problem I
Yeah.
have to admit I'm wrong, but it's getting easier to admit where my faults were, and yeah, I'm
Yeah.
getting ready to do in a solo episode where I'm just gonna clear out the closet completely. Like there's gonna be things people are gonna find out about me that are gonna look at me from a different way. But these are all the things I dealt with in my past. I don't want anything to hold me back because at this point I'm like, you know
Yeah.
what? I might as well just let everybody know exactly what it is, the demons I fight every day, and then just get it out there so people know. So it's like there's no unexpected road bumps coming up down the road that people be like, oh well, remember when you did this? Well, no, listen, this is what I'm gonna tell you. This is it. Here's everything out
Yeah.
for you, and then that's it. We're not going to talk about it any further. You want to ask me a question about it? Sure, I may answer, I may not answer, but I'm going to get it clearly,
Yeah.
completely out. That way people can understand the things that I've gone through and understand that I've been through a lot. Like I'm 40 years old now, but like I was a horrible person to be with. But I am doing what I can now to do better for
Yeah.
myself and other people,
To make
and
amends. Yeah.
definitely, yeah. And I think admitting I was fault is the hardest part first, but I mean, it's the first step to get it done.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's something that's so important is to take responsibility. We are not responsible for the things that happen to us. Like if you are transgressed as a child, if you are there's all kinds of things that happen that we are not responsible for, but we are responsible for how we respond to them. And so if we respond to them from our hurt by hurting other people, that is on us. And so, it wasn't your fault that your mom left when you were 10, but like that you took all that and then inflicted it on other people. I mean, that wasn't okay. And
No,
so I
no, it
think
wasn't.
taking responsibility for that is a huge part of the healing process.
It's the hardest part too, because then you have to admit you're wrong, and then you have to face what it is these people are saying to you. Like when these people are telling me I was just horrible, I was like, damn, was I really that horrible? You really think about all the interactions you've had with these people that are telling you these things. Like, yeah, the one girl I knew, we had caught up later down the road, and she had said, yeah, listen, you were a fucking terrible person to be around. Now I was just like, damn, just tell me,
Wow.
just rip off the band-aid, and just be honest with with me, you know, and
Yeah.
it's hard when you have to self-reflect and you have to look in the mirror at yourself and realize how horrible of a person you were to people. Like there's a few moments I can count that I was doing a little too much drinking. I got online and I verbally abused this one poor guy, and this guy was just trying to be my friend. And I just
Yeah.
like to this day I still deal with it, you know. It's like I tell people that story, but it's like not to be highlight how mean I was. It's just to highlight the fact that I admit that I was wrong. Like I shouldn't have done these things. Like
Yeah.
I had a problem, in instead of dealing it, I was self-diagnosing with drugs, and I was doing a lot of I was doing a lot of drinking. Like I mean, God, I can't even tell you guys how many like those just giant cans. Like okay, I was shotgunning like 6 of them, and then going online and just becoming the most
Wow.
toxic person ever. Like I literally just like I
Wow. You were one of those.
Yes, I was one of those horrible people. The proverbial thing of Call of Duty lobby is literally I tell my wife this and she's like, "What was that like? I don't understand." I said, "Just think of the most toxic place possible and you say anything." And most people
Yes.
are looking at me when we're in a group, they're all looking at me to say something because the minute I start saying something, you know some shit's gonna go down because oh, here he goes again. Whatever handle I had at the time, it's like, oh shit, here he goes. All right, yep, there he goes. And he's just
Yeah.
talking all this crazy stuff. And like, there was a guy in the 90s that did videos where he was just talking trash in these lobbies. And it wasn't like it was a prime example, except for I was like 10 times worse. I would say anything and
Wow.
everything to get to somebody. But I'm not in the right state of mind. Mind you, I'm literally in just a buzz state of mind. So I have no idea what I'm saying to you at this point. I'm literally just going off saying some wild things. And it doesn't matter what it is. You're telling people to kill themselves, these and so I use these experiences when I run into people online where I feel like the similar situation is happening. Like we had an incident where my wife was online playing and she ran into a younger kid and this guy told him to kill himself. So I came home and I messaged this guy. I said, "So I heard you like to pick on little kids, huh?" And I came to this kid's defense and it was just like, said some things to this guy. I was like, why do you feel this is okay to do, man? Like, what if that kid would have done that? What are you going to live with?
Yeah.
Oh, is it going to be okay with you? You're going to have to live the remorse that you just told the kid to go off himself and he went and did it. It's like, so I
Yeah.
try to use those experiences that I've lived through to let people know that, it's just not okay. Especially people with kids, they're letting them get online. Like you need to monitor
Yes. Oh
what
my
these kids are
gosh.
doing. Like
Yes.
Roblox is not a safe place anymore after that whole incident where
Yeah.
those predators are hiding in the backseat. Minecraft is another one like that. All the kids like to play
Yeah.
Minecraft. I had an incident where a young man from Colorado was 22 was messaging my daughter telling him, "Oh, I love her." And I'm like, "Dude, you're 22." He's like 14 at the time. I'm like, "No, you need to
Wow.
stop." And clearly in the conversation, you can tell that he's not there all stairs. So like, I was like, okay. So I played it cool. I was like, "Listen, hey, where do you live?" And he was just giving out his address and where he lives and everything else. I said, "Listen, do me a favor. Don't come back in this room and talk to these kids anymore, man. Understand what you're doing is wrong. If I need to, I will
Yeah.
reach out to the police in your state because I have your address and everything, and just leave them alone because we've had incidents like that where I've had one of my ex's friends or her son was typing on Roblox, was typing his home address to some random person out there. And I was like,
Wow.
"Hey, you shouldn't be doing that." And I told his mom, I was like, "Hey, listen, your son, I just caught him over there trying to type out his address to somebody on the internet. He doesn't even know." And the dad was like, "What?"
Yeah.
It's like, well, that's the scary part. It's like, these kids get online, Snapchat,
It's
all the
terrifying.
it is. It really is scary too, because if you look at the suicide rates in young men, me and a host of another show called Couple Nukes, Mr. Whiskey and I were discussing this. He and I were talking about how when the internet was introduced, young men's suicide rates went up dramatically because now you have to think. Not only did the phone, you can not only harass them on the phone. Now you have the internet. You can hit them AOL. You can hit them on
Yes.
Jesus, everything now. Instagram, X, wherever these kids are hanging out these days. TikTok, all these places where all these people just get
Yeah.
on and say the most toxic things ever, and it's
Horrible
scary.
things. Yeah.
I think the most scary video recently was I watched, and anybody that watches my Instagram feed seen it come through, is this girl, she's 16, talking about she's going to homecoming or something, and these men in the comments, what the fuck is going on with these people? Pardon the French, but this is
Yeah.
disgusting. These grown men are like, "Oh, that dress looked good on my floor." It's like, you're like 60 years old almost or something in the picture, man. Like, what the hell is
Yes.
wrong with you? Like, if that was my daughter, I would end up
No,
coming over
it's
there and
just
taking care of
not.
you.
Yes, like we are very, my niece does not, and she's 8. We
Mm-hmm.
do not put pictures of her on the internet, like with all this AI stuff and the way that it can be manipulated. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's gross. It is appalling
Mm-hmm.
and it's disturbing. And I
It's
was
beyond
listening
that because I
to,
had to explain to her though really quick that you can't put pictures on. She had done something where she had just taken a shower and taken a picture, And God forbid she put this on the internet. I was like, "Sweetie, you can't put that on the internet. Why?" Because boys don't know how to act right, is what I had to tell this poor girl. It's
Yes.
like, because we as men can't act like normal men. We have to act like perverts and disgusting individuals and do these things and sexualize these poor women and make them feel like, they have to dress a certain way to make them be attractive to us, which is quite
Yeah.
disgusting in my opinion. Especially her being, 14 at the time. I'm like, you really don't understand. Like, you don't understand who's
Yeah.
looking at these things online, and having to tell her that because boys can't act right. That's why you can't have a freedom to dress how you like, obviously, because everything is portrayed as slutty. Because we as men can't act like normal individuals. We have to act like little
Right.
toddlers. Even at my age is what I had to explain to this poor girl. And she's looking at me like, really? I'm like, yes, because we can't. Oh, really? Okay. Because you all can't act right. I'm like, I don't know how to put this to you, kiddo.
Well, I mean, the number one consumer of child pornography in the United States is men in their 30s to 40s that are married and have 2 or 3 children.
Isn't that
That
crazy
is,
though?
I am very passionate about um child, all of that stuff
Yeah.
that we have organizations that we give to. We can't go be the feet of Jesus, but we can help support them.
Yeah.
And so, the exploitation of children that happens right under our noses here in the States, like we think of other places that happening. Um, but I mean, again, that is why, like, all of my stuff is set to private. I do not post pictures of other people's children. I don't put pictures of my own niece and nephew on there because there's just too much like
Yeah.
wickedness. And I mean, that's what it is. It's wicked. And, I mean, I've turned into my mother and I talk about Satan, but I mean, it's satanic. And it's the stealing of innocence, and that is what Satan is all about.
I mean,
Um,
you're not wrong. I mean, you're
and
right. To think about it, it's like it's the devil in disguise. It's like that's how he works. He manipulates people to do these evil things, And a friend of mine had a conversation about this in private about something else, and he was talking about he had very bad intentional thoughts, and he was in church. He's like, I'm in church, and all of a sudden these thoughts come to me, you know. And I'm like, no, man, that's just the devil trying to get to you. And like
yeah,
for this year, I would never think that because I was never big a religious person. Now, like I've accepted faith. I will know how to look at how things work. You see a lot more things on a different perspective once you start realizing like how many
yeah,
things are at work in the backseat, especially when people do evil things.
yes,
It's like, why do people do evil things? Well, that's the devil's work. That's what he
yeah,
does. He influences you to do these evil things. Anytime you have bad thoughts, it's him trying to get to you in some way.
yeah,
And a lot of people will say, "Oh, it's whatever else." Whatever you want to call it, whatever that entity is,
right,
it's something that's making you think that way, and you
yes.
not giving into it is already winning the battle right there.
Right. Well, and I mean, the Bible says that Satan comes to kill, steal, and destroy. And like
Hmm.
that is what there is no goodness outside of God. And the Bible also talks about that we have to take every thought captive. And for someone that has intrusive thoughts, like stuff that's been going on with my sister-in-law and kind of all of that stuff. I would say this is the first time that I have had intrusive thoughts, but to think about, just the knowing my own what that is like for me while I'm trying to lay there and go to sleep at night and I'm having images come into my mind
Hmm.
and staying the night with her and all of that. And I mean, it's terrifying. And so to think that, you would have those of other things that would transgress other people, I mean, that it's terrifying. And so I think that this is kind of a tangent too, but I think that when we talk about trauma, there's not a lot of focus on the person that is doing the traumatizing. And so coming back to hurt people,
Hmm.
um, there are very few predators that were not at one point victims. And Brene Brown talks about that going through people are happier when they go through life believing that other people are trying their best. But the thing is, some people's best is not safe for society. And
Yeah.
so, coming back to it is not your fault what happened to you, but it is
Hmm.
your responsibility how you've responded to it. And yeah, I just think that there's so much forgiveness through the Lord, but I mean, there's consequences to what happens. And I think that it's really important to, um, whether you're dealing with grief through death or, something that you've done or whatever it is that you're experiencing, the trauma of that, that you have to realize that there are consequences to what you're doing. And so if you're hurting people in response to you being hurt, um, there's still consequences to that.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. So as we get ready to start wrapping up, I'm going to ask you two different questions. I don't know if you've ever seen one of these episodes. You may already know what the questions are going to be. So the first
I
question
have
is
not.
actually, okay, so the first one's going to be a fun one, okay? So
Okay.
if your mental health had a song, what would that song be?
Ooh, that's a good one. Maybe, No Doubt. Sorry, I'm at home right now, walking through the spider webs. Leave a message and I'll call you back. One of the things that I really struggle with is dissociation. And
Yeah.
so, um, when I dissociate, I start doing other things to get really busy. And so that definitely fits for me of like I've checked out, I'm doing something else. Come back later and we'll see what happens.
Right. It's such an interesting question because, like everybody's like, man, let me think about that one. A lot of people go, well, this is the first time I came thought. Mine was a multiple answer. I was like, let's lay this down in different situations for you. So it's always fun to see what people say to that one. So the
Yeah.
next question and the reason this podcast exists is that if you could break the stigma about mental health, I mean, something that you hear on a daily basis, you want people to stop believing, what would it be?
It's such a good question. There's several things that come to mind. I mean, I guess it comes back to what I have said. You are not responsible for what has happened to you, but you are responsible for what you do with it. And trauma is subjective, and we cannot live in a trauma response. And doing those things that is only going to keep you stuck in the cycle of that is going to leave you feeling really powerless. And so I think that that's the huge one, is that this is not your fault, but you do have to take responsibility. And there are a lot of people out there that love you and want to help you, even people that don't know you. One of the things that I say to my clients is, I'm going to let you borrow some of my hope until you have your own. And there are tons of mental health resources out there that are available to you free of cost to help you work through stuff so that you're not inflicting your wounds on other people.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Caroline, for coming today. I appreciate it. If anybody would
Yeah.
like to reach out to you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
So my website is cwkcounseling.com. I am also on Instagram and TikTok. My handle is Bruised Banana Counseling. I kind of think through life um, that we're all sort of like a banana, and like something can happen and it's like a big thing and you're like, oh my gosh, that's a huge bruise. We're going to have to like cut that out. But then a lot of times we're walking through life and we look in the mirror and we're just sort of like, I'm just kind of bruised. And so that is where that comes from. I have kind of daily tidbits that I put on there, and I also have a great social media guy that I have on there, or that films professional stuff. But yeah, I love it. Social media has been new to me this year, but I've really enjoyed being on there. So yeah, Bruce Banana Counseling. And you can email me through my website too. I am licensed in Colorado, Florida, Arkansas, Louisiana, and Texas, and about to be Georgia. So, yeah, I would
Sounds
be
great.
happy to. Yeah, and I love talking therapy. I think that it's really important, like you said, to break the stigma of what mental health looks like. And so, yeah, that's what I'm here for.
Definitely. Well, thank you again, Caroline, so much for coming and hanging out with us today. I really enjoyed this conversation. And guys, if you need to reach her, you know where to find her. I'll have all her socials linked down below. Here we go. And with that being said, if I can get my life together right, that'd be great. If with that being said, we're gonna wrap up this episode of Pete vs. Anxiety. I'm Pete vs. Anxiety on X all the way down to TikTok. I'm on Spotify all the way down to Pandora Radio. And as I always say, it costs nothing absolutely to be kind to somebody. One kind act you could do could save someone's life, or hell, you can make their day. I'm Pete vs. Anxiety signing off saying, don't ask how your day is today. Say, hey, how's your mental health today?